The USS Hartford was conceived as part of a broader effort by the United States Navy in the mid-19th century to modernize its fleet and assert American maritime power globally. The ship's design and construction reflected the evolving needs of a nation expanding its influence and facing growing international and domestic challenges. In the 1850s, the United States Navy sought to transition from older wooden sailing ships to more versatile vessels that combined traditional sail power with steam propulsion. This hybrid approach provided the endurance of sailing ships with the reliability and maneuverability of steam engines. A similar design would have been seen on the American Collins Line ship, the paddle steamer SS Arctic, about 8 years prior to the launch of the Hartford, but with the addition of paddle wheels on either side of the ship. The Hartford was one of several new sloops of war intended to bolster the Navy's ability to patrol distant waters, protect American interests, and engage in combat if necessary. The Hartford was laid down in 1858 at the Boston Navy Yard, one of the Navy's primary shipbuilding facilities. The ship was designed as a screw sloop of war, incorporating a single screw propeller powered by a steam engine, but it retained a full rigging of sails to ensure operational flexibility. Its construction represented the cutting-edge naval technology of the era, blending tried and true wooden shipbuilding techniques with modern engineering. The Hartford was a fully rigged sloop of war, equipped with a comprehensive sail plan to harness wind power. The sails were configured among three masts, with square sails on the foremast and mainmast, along with fore and aft sails for maneuverability. The sails served as the primary means of propulsion during long voyages, conserving coal and allowing for extended range without reliance on steam power. Sailing provided greater endurance, particularly useful in an area when coal resupply was limited. In addition to its sails, the Hartford featured a steam engine for propulsion when wind conditions were unfavorable or precise maneuvering was required. The engine type was a horizontal, back-acting steam engine, a common design in naval vessels at the time. The engine was powered by two coal-fired boilers, reducing steam to drive the propeller. A single screw propeller provided propulsion when under steam. The propeller could be disengaged and lifted out of the water to reduce drag when the ship was under sail. The steam engine allowed the Hartford to maintain speed and maneuverability in calm weather or during combat when wind power alone was insufficient. The combination of sails and steam gave the Hartford operational flexibility. It could rely on its sails for long-distance cruising and shift to steam power for technical maneuvers, such as navigating rivers or positioning during battle. This dual system made it versatile and effective for the varied demands of naval warfare during the Civil War. The Hartford was initially intended to be used in protecting American commercial shipping, showing the flag in distant waters, and safeguarding the nation's growing global interests. However, with the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861, rapidly changed its mission. As the Union Navy expanded and reorganized to enforce blockades and control key waterways, the Hartford became a critical asset. Its combination of steam power, heavy armament, and sturdy construction made it ideal for riverine and coastal operations, where agility and firepower were essential. The Hartford was a heavily armed vessel for its time. Here's a detailed rundown of its armament, along with descriptions of each type of weapon. The 9-inch Dahlgren smoothbore guns. These large, muzzle-loading smoothbore guns were the backbone of the Hartford's armament. Designed by Rear Admiral John A. Dahlgren, they were capable of firing solid-shot explosive shells and canister shot. Characteristics: range, about 3,000 yards with solid shot. Weight of projectile, around 73 pounds or 90 pounds. Operation: Crew served with a multi-step loading and aiming process. Use: effective against both wooden ships and shore fortifications. The 20-pounder Parrott rifle. This was a rifled cannon with increased accuracy over smoothbore guns. These were also used for precise targeting. Characteristics: range, up to 2,000 yards with accuracy. Weight of projectile, 20 pounds. Features: recognizable by the wrought iron band around the breech for added strength. Use: often used for disabling enemy ships or targeting fortifications at a distance. The 12-pound howitzers. These were small, versatile artillery pieces, often mounted on the deck or used in ships' boats for amphibious operations. Characteristics: range, short, typically under 1,000 yards. Weight of projectile, 12 pounds. Use: anti-personnel weapons, capable of firing explosive shells, grape shot, or canister shot. Other considerations: broadside armament. The Hartford carried most of its guns in a broadside configuration, allowing for devastating volleys against enemy ships or shore targets. Shells and shot. Weapons on the Hartford were capable of firing various types of ammunition. These included solid shot, for smashing through wooden hulls, explosive shells, for causing fires or internal damage, canister shot, a form of anti-personnel ammunition effective at close range, and grape shot, an anti-personnel ammunition consisting of small iron balls fired in a wide shotgun-like spread, devastating against tightly packed enemies at close range. The Hartford was launched on the 22nd of November in 1858 at the Boston Navy Yard and was sponsored by Miss Carrie Downs, Miss Lizzie Stringham, and Lieutenant G. J. H. Preble, and commissioned on the 27th of May in 1859, and was put under the command of Charles Lowndes. After shakedown out of Boston, the new screw sloop-of-war carried Flag Officer Cornelius K. Stribling, the newly appointed commander of the East India Squadron, sailed for the Cape of Good Hope and the Far East. Upon reaching the Orient, the Hartford relieved the Mississippi as flagship. In November, she embarked the American minister to China, John Elliott Ward, at Hong Kong, and carried him to Canton, Manila, Swantao, Shanghai, and other Far Eastern ports to settle American claims and to arrange for favorable consideration of the nation's interests. With the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861, the Hartford was ordered home. She departed the Sunda Strait with the Decanta on the 30th of August in 1861 and arrived in Philadelphia on the 2nd of December to be fitted out for wartime service. She departed the Delaware Capes on the 28th of January as flagship of Flag Officer David G. Farragut, the commander of the newly created West Gulf Blockading Squadron. An even larger purpose than the important blockade of the South's Gulf Coast lay behind Farragut's assignment. Late in 1861, the Union High Command decided to capture New Orleans, the South's richest and most populous city, to begin a drive of sea-based power up the Mississippi River to meet the Union Army, which was to drive down the Mississippi Valley behind a spearhead of armored gunboats. Other operations: Secretary of the Navy Gibbon Wells warned Farragut, must not be allowed to interfere with the great objective in view, the certain capture of the city of New Orleans. The Hartford arrived on the 20th of February at Ship Island, Mississippi, midway between Mobile Bay and the mouths of the Mississippi. Several Union ships and a few Army units were already in the vicinity when the squadron's flagship dropped anchor at the advanced staging area for the attack on New Orleans. In ensuing weeks, a mighty fleet would assemble for the campaign. In mid-March, Commander David Dixon Porter's flotilla of mortar schooners arrived towed by steam gunboats. The next task was to get Farragut's ships across the bar, a consistently shifting mudbank at the mouth of each passing entering the Mississippi. Farragut managed to get all of his ships but the Colorado across the bar and into the river, where Forts St. Philip and Jackson challenged further advance. A line of hulks connected by strong barrier chains 6 ships of the Confederate Navy, including ironclad Manassas and unfinished but potentially deadly ironclad Louisiana, 2 ships of the Louisiana Navy, a group of converted river steamers called the Confederate River Defense Fleet, and a number of fire rafts also stood between Farragut and the great southern metropolis. On the 16th of April, the Union ships moved up the river to a position below the forts, and David Dixon Porter's gunboats first exchanged fire with the Southern guns. 2 days later, his mortar schooners opened a heavy barrage, which continued for 6 days. On the 21st, the squadron's fleet captain, Henry H. Bell, led a daring expedition upriver, and despite a tremendous fire on him, cut the chain across the river. In the early hours of the 24th of April, a red lantern on Hartford's mizzen peak signaled the fleet to get under way, and steamed through the breach in the obstructions. As the ships closed on the forts, their broadsides answered a fire from the Confederate guns. Porter's mortar schooners and gunboats remained at their stations below the southern fortifications, covering the movement with rapid fire. The Hartford would dodge a run by the ironclad ram Manassas, then, while attempting to avoid a firecraft, grounded in the swift current near Fort St. Philip, when the burning barge was shoved alongside the Flagship. Only Farragut's leadership and the training of the crew saved Hartford from being destroyed by flames, which at one point engulfed a large portion of the ship. Meanwhile, the sloop's gunners never slacked the pace at which they fired into the forts. As our firefighters snuffed out the flames, the Flagship backed free of the bank. When Farragut's ships had run the gauntlet and passed out of range of the fort's guns, the Confederate River Defense Fleet attempted to stop their progress. In the ensuing melee, they managed to sink converted merchantman USS Verona, the only Union ship lost during the night. The next day, after silencing Confederate batteries a few miles below New Orleans, Hartford and her sister ships anchored off the city early in the afternoon. A handful of ships and men had won a great decisive victory that secured the north and the mouth of the Mississippi River. In early May, Farragut ordered several of his ships upstream to clear the river, and would follow himself in Hartford on the 7th to join in the conquest of the valley. Defenseless, Baton Rouge and Natchez promptly surrendered to the Union ships, and no significant opposition was encountered until the 18th of May, when the Confederate commander at Vicksburg replied to Commander Samuel P. Lee's demands for surrender. He would say, "Mississippians don't know and refuse to learn how to surrender to an enemy. If Commodore Farragut or Brigadier General Butler can teach them, let them come and try." When Farragut arrived on the scene a few days later, he learned that heavy Southern guns mounted on the bluff at Vicksburg, some 200 feet or 61 meters above the river, could shell his ships while his own guns could not be elevated enough to hit them back. Since sufficient troops were not available to take the fortress by storm, the flag officer headed downstream on the 27th of May, leaving the gunboats to blockade it from below. Orders awaited Farragut at New Orleans, where he arrived on the 30th of May, directing him to open the river and join the western flotilla, and stating that Abraham Lincoln himself had given the task the highest of priorities. The flag officer recalled Porter's mortar schooners from Mobile, Alabama, and got underway up the Mississippi and Hartford on the 8th of June. The Union squadron was assembled just below Vicksburg on the 26th of June, 1862. 2 days later, the Union ships, their own guns blazing at rapid fire, and covered by an intense barrage from the mortars, suffered little damage while running past the batteries. Flag Officer Davis, commanding the Western Flotilla, joined Farragut above Vicksburg on the 30th, but naval efforts to take Vicksburg were frustrated by a lack of troops. Ships, Porter commented, cannot crawl up hills 300 feet high, and it is that part of Vicksburg which must be taken by the Army. On the 22nd of July, Farragut received orders to return down the river at his discretion, and he got underway on the 24th of July. Reaching New Orleans in 4 days, and after a fortnight, sailed to Pensacola, Florida, for repairs. The flagship would return to New Orleans on the 9th of November to prepare for further operation in the unpredictable waters of the Mississippi. The Union Army, unable to support for the Mississippi Squadron, was pressing on Vicksburg from above, and Farragut wanted to assist in the campaign by blockading the mouth of the Red River, from which supplies were pouring eastward to the Confederate Army. Meanwhile, the South had been fortifying its defenses along the river and erecting powerful batteries at Port Hudson, Louisiana. On the night of the 14th of March in 1863, Farragut in the Hartford and accompanied by 6 other ships attempted to run by these batteries. However, they encountered such heavy and accurate fire that only the Flagship and the Albatross, lashed alongside the Hartford, succeeded in running the gauntlet. Thereafter, Hartford and her escort patrolled it between Port Hudson and Vicksburg, denying the Confederacy desperately needed supplies from the west. Porter's Mississippi Squadron, cloaked by night, dashed downstream past the Vicksburg batteries on the 16th of April, while General Ulysses S. Grant marched his troops overland to a new base also below the southern stronghold. April would close with the Navy ferrying Grant's troops across the river to Brennsburg, whence they encircled Vicksburg and forced the belligerent fortress to surrender on July 4th. With the Mississippi River now open, Farragut turned his attention to Mobile, a Confederate industrial center still building ships and turning out war supplies. The Battle of Mobile Bay would take place on the 5th of August in 1864. Farragut, with Hartford, captained by Percival Drayton as his flagship, led a fleet consisting of 4 ironclad monitors and 14 wooden vessels. The Confederate naval force was composed of the newly built ram, CSS Tennessee, under the command of Admiral Franklin Duncans as his flagship, and gunboats Salama, Morgan, and Gaines, and backed by the powerful guns of Fort Morgan and Gaines in the bay. From the firing of the first gun by Fort Morgan to the raising of the white flag of surrender by Tennessee, little more than 3 hours elapsed, but 3 hours of terrific fighting on both sides. The Confederates had only 32 casualties, while the Union forces suffered 335 casualties, including 113 men drowned in the Tecumseh when the Monitor struck a torpedo mine and sank. 12 of Hartford's sailors were awarded the Medal of Honor for their action at the Battle of Mobile Bay. These men are seen on screen. Returning to New York on the 13th of December, Hartford was decommissioned for repairs a week later. She was back in shape in July of 1865, where she served as flagship for a newly organized Aztec fleet, until August of 1868, when she returned to New York again and was decommissioned. She was recommissioned on the 9th of October in 1872, where she resumed Aztec Station patrol until returning home on the 19th of October in 1875. 2 of her crewmen, Ordinary Seaman John Calestio and Ordinary Seaman Richard Ryan, were awarded the Medal of Honor for rescuing drowning shipmates in separate to 1876 incidents. In 1882, as flagship of the North Atlantic Station under Captain Stephen B. Luce, Hartford visited the Caroline Islands, Hawaii, and Valparaiso, Chile, before arriving in San Francisco on the 17th of March in 1884. She then cruised in the Pacific until decommissioning on the 14th of January in 1887 at Mare Island, California, for apprentice sea training use. From 1890 to 1899, Hartford was laid up at Mare Island, the last 5 years of which she was being rebuilt. On the 2nd of October in 1899, Hartford was recommissioned, then transferred to the Atlantic coast to be used for a training and cruise ship for midshipmen. In January of 1903, she was reported to visit France, including Vichy France, Chermères, and Marseille. She served as a training ship until the 24th of October in 1912, when she was transferred to Charleston for use as a station ship. Again placed out of commission on the 20th of August in 1926, the Hartford remained at Charleston until moved to Washington, D.C. on the 18th of October in 1938. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted to build a naval museum there, featuring the Hartford, USS Olympia, and a four-stack destroyer from World War I. When Roosevelt died, plans to establish this museum and save the ships were abandoned. On the 19th of October 1945, the Hartford was towed to the Norfolk Navy Yard and classified as a relic. The ship was allowed to deteriorate, and as a result, Hartford sank at her berth on the 20th of November in 1956. She proved to be beyond salvage, and was subsequently dismantled. The demise of the Hartford marks a sorrowful chapter in her illustrious history. However, her legacy endures far beyond her physical remains. Fragments of this one mighty warship are scattered across the United States, serving as reminders of her service. Notable examples of this include the ship's wheel and fife rifle, currently on display at the United States Navy Museum in Washington, D.C., and her anchor, proudly exhibited in the courtyard of Fort Gaines in Alabama. In fact, over 30 artifacts from the Hartford can be found in museums across the nation. Though left to succumb to the ravages of time and neglect, the Hartford stands as a testament to her era and the formidable power she once commanded. The surviving remnants of this historical vessel deserve our respect and admiration, offering a tangible connection to the past and a glimpse into the world in which she served. I hope you have enjoyed this exploration of the Hartford's history. I possess a deep and enduring fascination with the American Civil War, not just merely its battles or the individual ships or people that emerged from the conflict, but the era as a whole. I have 3 more videos planned on Civil War era vessels and most likely battles, with the possibility of more to follow. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. I look forward to sharing more with you in the next video. Until next time, be safe.